Hello, welcome back. I hope you had a good lunch. Now it should be your afternoon time there in Uganda and Tanzania, and wherever else you're watching from. I can't speak for you, but I'm glad you're with us. We have one more session to go with the classical apologetics class, uh, or this class session rather. And this time I thought I'd give you some very practical, well-known arguments for God's existence, the actual arguments, and to defend them somewhat. I say somewhat only because I want to warn you that there are books written to defend, both to defend and to debate the conditions of these arguments. They are probability arguments, which means they're more likely true than false, than their contradiction. But they're very, very good arguments, and they're very commonsensical arguments, so that when you see them, you'll know, wow, it's just kind of surprising anybody would try to debate it. But there are different questions. There are many, many different questions that can come up, which would cause us to doubt one or two of the premises, perhaps. And if that is the case for you, if you want more information in any rate about these arguments, I highly recommend you go to reasonablefaith.org for one. That's William Lane Craig's website, whom I'm drawing from heavily in this class. And there are many, many other places you can go for very similar arguments. Alvin Plantinga has his own kind of unique blend of arguments. I will not be sharing his famous argument, the ontological. But there are, I just want to be able to inform you about this being the beginning, so that you will be able to dig in somewhat more thoroughly if it's interesting to you. So without further ado, let's begin our class. All right, today's class, 3 arguments. Classical apologetics, 3 arguments. And once again, my name is Eric Turkelson, and I used to go to Torch Trinity as a student. I am very grateful to be asked to volunteer for this course, to teach this course, as this is one of my favorite topics. So I hope that we'll be able to share lots of good Q&A in the time coming up. Please take notes as we go. If you disagree or if you agree, take notes. You don't have to be convinced about all of these arguments in order to be a Christian. In fact, I was not convinced about the moral argument the first few times I heard it, and I was already a Christian. So it's not like these things are hinging on, salvation matters or things, but they do help to buttress our faith, support our faith, and they do help us to share our faith with other people. Because if for example, I had a dream that caused me to go to church and I became a Christian through that, I cannot show someone else my dream. And if they have a dream of their own, they can just deny it just as well. So we need many different paths of evidence to try and circle around and surround people with their denial of truth, basically, so that they come to terms with what's reality around them, and cling to God and run to Jesus for salvation. But it's not a silver bullet. I will not be sharing a silver bullet with you today. There is no such thing as an argument that'll just change everybody's mind, because our minds are sinful. We will do what we want to do with the information we are given. But as God says, to whom much is given, much is required. So you may be, you should just be a messenger. That's the short form of that. Use these well. If you don't trust these arguments, don't use them. Find other ones. But we're going to go through these today. The 3 arguments are Kalaam Cosmological Argument first, a very popular one these days. It's called the Kalaam because it's based off of Muslim philosophers' work in the, I think, the in the Middle Ages at some point. I can't be sure about the history of that. But the cosmological argument, as I said in the previous class, is not one argument. There are many, many different cosmological arguments, independent arguments, in fact, which support and strengthen our case. The more different arguments we have, the more different sound arguments we have, the stronger our case becomes as ambassadors for Christ. So this cosmological argument that I will share with you is called the Kalaam, and it is the one that William Lane Craig most often champions. And he named it, I think, the Kalaam. It might have been named before him, but he, well, I'll let him tell the story. Go to his website, find out. Teleological argument. That's the next one we'll discuss, because I think this is another common sense kind of argument having to do with the fine-tuning of the universe, which is not common sense. It's very, very mathematical and things that are beyond my imagination. But the argument itself is not. And you can use similar teleological arguments, that is an argument to design or from design, about the design in nature. I'm sure that you already have your own ideas about how God is present in the way that, or revealed by his fingerprints in what he has made, right? This is what Romans 1 had told us, that God makes nature a certain way that we should know about him. We can see his designs everywhere, even in our own bodies and through philosophy, because God is a thinking mind, right? So the case for the resurrection will be the last one. The most important one, really, is the case for the resurrection. Every Christian should know something about the case for the resurrection by reading the Gospels themselves. And if they do read those, they will be equipped. But this will be a very, a much more rigorous way of, much more academically rigorous way of doing it. I will not go to the detail that William Lane Craig does, nor what another set of scholars who I'll tell you about that are famous for this case, Mike Licona and Gary Habermas, especially Gary Habermas. They are very, very good at doing this in a very academic way. Gary Habermas in particular does a minimal facts approach using only 6 facts, and his criteria for the facts is very strict, that even skeptical scholars, atheist scholars, non-Christian scholars, and others must agree to the facts that he's going to use to build his case. In essence, he's tying his arm behind his back and saying, I can still make the case. So that's, you don't have to tie your arm behind your back, but that is one way to impress the unbeliever. So these are the 3 styles of argument we'll speak about today. If you remember last class, I gave you a long list, a much longer list of different categories of arguments, each one's being representative of evidence for God. These are all evidence for God. The next time you hear someone say, there's no evidence for God, just kind of chuckle at them and ask them, how much time do you have? Because there's a lot to talk about if there's no evidence. Let's go on. The Kalaam, Cosmological Argument. Ooh. And the Kalaam Cosmological Argument is for God's existence. However, William Lane Craig will even point out the argument itself does not mention God, and that's true, and we don't need to. But you'll see how it works out. This is such a simple argument, deceptively simple. It's actually very deep, that it's something probably most of us have already thought about, but just not to this degree. The Kalaam Cosmological Argument has 3 steps, 2 premises, 2 very basic premises, and a conclusion. And they go like this: whatever begins to exist has a cause. Whatever begins to exist has a cause, not whatever exists, so that when Richard Dawkins or others come back with the retort, who made God? If you're so curious about how the universe was made, we don't have to answer that question because you don't answer who made God. They'll say things like this. Well, nobody made God. That's the God I believe in. And we don't actually have such a strict rule in place in mind for things needing to have a explanation or a cause. Whatever begins to exist, though, always has a cause. It always has an explanation for its existence. If you can imagine an effect without a cause, you're just very good at imagining. Or maybe you're not imagining what you think you are imagining, because an effect is something that has a cause by definition. I think we'll get into that as well. But the universe began to exist. That's number two. So I think you can already sense the big punchline coming up here, the conclusion, that is, whatever begins to exist has a cause. The universe began to exist. What follows logically from these two premises? Irresistibly logically. The way this is worded, if these two premises are true, number three, the conclusion, must be true. Therefore, the universe has a cause. That's the therefore. It's not very impressive, is it? But this is basically saying the universe has a cause. And it's an argument. It's an argument for that, a philosophical argument that has a lot of paperwork following it. There's a lot of people writing on this. It's not something that just Christian apologists are doing. So whatever begins to exist has a cause. The universe began to exist, therefore the universe has a cause. Yeah, well, so what? Some people might say, you still didn't prove God exists. Wait, if we argued for premise one and premise two, we've already begun to lay the foundation and the structure work for the next question that would come up. Because if you're a curious person at all, your next question is going to be, oh, well, I guess I'll let you wait on that before we go. We're going to go through premise one and premise two before I jumped ahead. So I was going to say, if you're a curious person at all, you're going to ask, what caused the universe? And just by philosophical meditation, just by thinking and looking at the mountains for a little while, you're going to start to figure that one out. So let's look at this. Number one, whatever begins to exist has a cause. You might be surprised to know that this is one of the most debated premises. And I don't know why. One cannot do science if they have to deny this. Are they saying that things can just pop into existence out of nothing for no reason and no cause? There's no such thing as an effect without a cause. That's because an effect by definition has a cause. You cannot do science if you deny the cogency of this statement. Because you can't get something from absolutely nothing. I'm not speaking mystical language here, am I? Right? This is common sense. Every day, look left and the right before you cross the street kind of rationality. It works. It's not a rationality that humans invented somehow. This is logic. And all we need is the right content to fit into our logic, and we've got a case. Logic doesn't tell us anything by itself. There's no information in logic. It's just the rules for thinking. It's the rules for how to know if something's false or true. Right? So you cannot get something from absolutely nothing. Anyone who tells you otherwise is fudging, is faking somewhere with one of those words. You'll hear actual scientists saying that now we know we can get something from nothing. Or even they'll say something like, nothing is something, nothing is not nothing anymore, and then proceed to define their something that with the word nothing. Well, this is just abuse of language. They're telling jokes without laughing. I mean, this is supposed to be funny because they're not using the word the way it ought to be used. Nothing in this case being a universal negative. We're removing, we're not adding. So you cannot get something if there's not anything there to produce it. That's just sense. Self-creation, what about that? Well, maybe the universe is an exception to all these other physical things, because the laws of physics breaks down after the Big Bang is reversed or something like this, right? Well, self-creation doesn't even make sense. How can you have something before it exists so that it can make itself? It doesn't happen. That's worse than magic, as many people will say. There's no magician, there's no hat, there's no rabbit to pull out of the hat, and still there it's just this magical boom, yeah, just popped into existence. No, self-creation can't happen because it's a contradiction, and that's one of the 4 ways of knowing that get negotiated, as I spoke about in the previous class. So watch out for this, right? Is it something we need to even question, that something can be and not be at the same time in the same relationship? No, it can't be and also not be at the same time in order to make itself be. It's really a joke that they're taking seriously. Quantum physics is no proven exception to this rule. Don't let anyone fool you. A lot of people use the word quantum physics when they don't even know anything about quantum physics, including me. But I do know that there are quantum physicists that have different interpretations than the usual one that gets seen a lot on the internet and gets a lot of publicity, about how there's an indeterminacy principle and things are moving without being moved. And no, that's magic. That's not science. There are perfectly sound scientists, quantum physicists, who do not agree with this strange interpretation of the data in quantum physics. So whatever begins to exist has a cause. The next premise, there's more we can say about these things, but I myself am somewhat limited, but we can go to those experts who have been studying these things, and I can try to direct your questions to those things. I do know a little bit more that I'm putting on here. Maybe I'll be able to give you the answer, but if not, I'll show you where you can find it. So the universe began to exist. This is actually a big one, I think, because for a long time in philosophy, it was admitted that we can't be sure whether the universe was eternal or whether it had a beginning. And if it was eternal, the atheists were happy because they said, see, we don't need a beginner to explain all these things. We don't need a God. It always surprises me that they say we don't need this to explain that. Like, so what? The question is whether God is real, not whether you need him to explain something. Maybe your explanation is bad. So the universe began to exist is actually something most people seem to agree with now, even though this is also debated, because of the Big Bang cosmology. Big Bang might be controversial in some church circles. I don't think it needs to be controversial, except for some people's interpretation of it. It's just saying that the universe has a beginning and it was very expansive. Sounds like Genesis 1 to me. The universe began to exist helps the Christian chiefly because if all matter and space and physical time began at the universe, then what happened before that? There's no matter, energy, physical space, or physical time. All time and space, it starts at the Big Bang. Then what kind of cause could that be? That's where we start seeing the power of this simple argument as an evidence that God exists. The universe began to exist. What makes us think this? Well, actually, there is very strong philosophical evidence of a beginning. What do I mean? There's arguments. William Lane Craig gives 2 very good philosophical arguments that we should think the universe had a beginning. And he even says that these are stronger evidences to him than the modern science. Because people like the the Muslim philosopher who started this Kalaam thing, could be living in such a long time ago and still come to these very strong conclusions that the universe had a beginning without the scientific evidence. So there's a metaphysical evidence, and there's also the physical evidence of science. The red shift, if you know anything about the Big Bang cosmology, you might have heard the words red shift, which is how even Einstein was convinced, who unwillingly convinced that the universe had a beginning. Einstein wanted to believe the universe was eternal, but a very famous astronomer, Hubble, who we named our telescope satellite after him, Hubble, showed Einstein the redshift in the telescope, and that was somehow some kind of evidence that the universe is expanding and things are getting farther and farther away from us. He did not change his mind immediately, as some of the stories go, but he did eventually change his mind. And I'm sure Hubble played a big part in that. So there's scientific evidence based on modern cosmology and different models of the universe, how it could be, and how many of the models are failing, like the ones that expand, contract, as if there's some eternal Big Bang, big collapse. Those models fail consistently. Multiverse theories nowadays you hear about, I think we should just leave that in the Marvel universe, because really, I mean, why? There's no evidence that there's a multiverse, and what benefit is that to us anyway? Even the multiverse would need some kind of a fine-tuning, which is the next argument we'll see, and it wouldn't be infinite. It would still have a limit. So we can argue about the infinity of things and the improbability of that. That's where those philosophical evidences prove the universe also had a beginning. Simple way is this: if you don't understand the science, you don't understand the philosophy, you can look outside, and how many things there that you see have a short lifespan? Is there anything in your garden that's eternal? Anything on the earth, under the water, in the sky that lasts forever? No, everything comes and goes. And this is what we learn in Ecclesiastes too. Things seem to go on forever, but only in a short lifetime kind of sense. People live, people die, and other people are born. The mountains crumble and fall into the sea. There's something about the universe where we see a constant state of entropy, or things breaking down. It's not living forever or building up. And this is another good reason why you should think that the universe also had a beginning. Why? Because the universe is made of all that stuff. If everything that the universe makes up the universe is temporary, then the universe is temporary. And there's no reason to exclude the universe from premise one, that it began to exist. I don't know why we would make an excuse for the universe unless we are replacing God with the universe. So therefore, the universe has a cause. Now, this cause must be something special, because it wouldn't be the universe. It wouldn't be in the universe. It would transcend the universe somehow. How do we know that? Well, the universe didn't exist before it was caused. So it cannot be, by reason of logic, no matter what the physical laws of nature were at that time, it cannot be that the universe had a cause that was made of matter and energy and the things that make up the universe. So what cause could be sufficient? Well, this cause must be something that probably transcends time, or physical time at least. I mean, I'm one that thinks time is not physical. I can easily think of minutes passing by in my imagination. I don't need a body for that. If I were just a soul, I would sense time going by. I think that's the same way it is for God. But the main thing is immaterial. there's no matter, then there's no material. He's immaterial. Whatever cause did this is immaterial. It's not natural because everything natural is in the universe. So it must be supernatural. It's immaterial. It's supernatural. It's immaterial and supernatural, really the same thing, just maybe different ways of looking at it. It's immensely powerful to create the universe the way it did. And it should be personal, not just some kind of condition. It can't be a physical condition like cold to create the universe. If you can imagine cold as the condition, it would just make everything freeze the whole time. The cold is not changing, it's eternal. So it's got to be an eternal, timeless, spaceless, it's got to be powerful, and it's got to be personal. And that's not all. We can think of other things just from this kind of argument. From this morning's argument, you could also add in there that it could be good. The first cause must be good as the standard of good. If we're using the moral argument together with the cosmological argument, but just using the cosmological, we don't actually get into that. So you can see how close we are getting here to the beginning of the Bible. In the beginning, God, Genesis 1:1. Because all of these things, timeless, spaceless, personal, powerful, these are qualities of God. It's got to, I would think all wise would fit in that because of the way that he uses his power to put all these things together, just so in a design sense. So we have a life permitting universe. That's how we get to our next argument. So just briefly, I would like to repeat the argument for you for this cosmological argument before we move on to the next one. And that is, whatever begins to exist has a cause. Number two, the universe began to exist. Conclusion, therefore, the universe has a cause. Now, what cause could this be? It could be none other than God. I mean, you can call it whatever you like, but it sounds an awful lot like God. We're getting closer to my worldview and further away from an atheist or a pagan worldview. In the beginning, God. Right? So we have these things logically worked out. Even the personal thing. There's arguments for each one of these characteristics I've mentioned. I just don't have time to get into each one of them. Chiefly, you have to think of the cause being not in the universe, and then you sense the qualities of God coming out from that thought experiment right there. Now for the teleological argument, which is an argument to explain fine-tuning. This teleological argument is an argument to explain fine-tuning, so otherwise known as the teleological argument from fine-tuning. This word teleological has to do with design, so that any argument that's related to design can be called a teleological argument. We hear a lot of them these days from I don't have the book next to me, from our friends in the ID movement. There's Jewish and even non-religious and many Christians involved in the ID movement, and the Discovery Institute is leading the charge on that movement. This movement is largely made of scientists and engineers and even doctors who are studying nature with the intention of looking for teleology, rather than assuming everything's an accident that crashed into each other, or a mutation of a gene from Darwinian thinking. And they come quite strongly against Darwinian thinking on scientific grounds, without even a reference to their religion, because they're convinced on the science that the Darwinian paradigm is false and only useful insofar as it gets some things right and many things wrong. So the teleological argument could be related to biology in animals, or I don't know, maybe even geology. We'll see. There's a geologist I know of who might be thinking along those lines. That the fine-tuning argument is more of another cosmological kind of thing, using not the cosmology of philosophy, but of physics. The physicist who is a cosmologist. That means they study the universe and use the mathematics of physics. This argument is related to that fine-tuning. We'll have to define what fine-tuning is in just a moment. Okay, but already you can probably guess that it has something to do with how things are just so on our planet or in our universe. So this is an argument for God's existence more expressly, and it's also the way that William Lane Craig words it. There's other ways to put this. Number one, the fine-tuning of the universe is due to either, and he gives us three options, the three either, physical necessity, chance, or design. And he adds, in his book, he adds, if you can think of a fourth one, let me know. But so far, nobody has come out to offer a fourth one. So it's either physical necessity, chance, random accidents of things crashing into other things. Physical necessity is more, it's the laws of nature made it this way and only this way to be life permitting, or it was designed to be life permitting. Fine tuning has something to do with how we actually can exist in this universe, because it's vastly more probable that our universe could have come together in such a way that no planets existed, and so no life. So that's what I mean by fine-tuning of life permitting universes. Again, I'll define that in just a moment. But number two is, it is not due to physical necessity or chance. Therefore, you tell me. Therefore, it is due to design. That's right. So it is due to design because it's not due to physical necessity or chance. This is an argument that reasons out possibilities as non-possibilities, and therefore leaves us with our only logical remaining champion. This is the process of elimination. It's common sense, right? And it's very, very strictly worded. And I think you'll see that it's very, very effective. The big key will be that we have to show chance is not a good option, because that's the reigning champion of all of our media and movies and stories and science documentaries today. So it's very believable to people because they live and breathe that. But I think that R.C. Sproul does a good job of showing that chance is actually more of a modern myth. It is the forces of chaos as if they were God. So again, we have a Romans 1 situation where people are suppressing the truth, even unknowingly, in their unrighteousness, to replace God with things of this world. So what is fine tuning? Isn't this wonderful? I'm getting these star pictures from NASA. This is not someone's art. This is an actual nebula out in space called a reflection nebula. It's one of many reflection nebulas, whatever those are. And it is apparently pretending to be the Virgin Mary up there or something. I don't know. I don't know. But wow, do you see it? I see like a woman's head holding a torch. But it's just a nebula. So what is fine tuning? Okay, so here is the deal about fine tuning. The physical laws of nature, when given mathematical expression, like in physics with the formulas, the physical laws of nature contain various constants whose values are not determined by the laws themselves. The constants are the letters in an equation, and the value is already predetermined somehow. That's the way the equation works. And the equation is describing something in nature, so it's called a law of nature. The laws of nature are just descriptions of what's happening in nature. So you have equations. You're familiar with equations like E equals mc squared. Well, there's also equations for gravity and other things that I don't memorize. And they have letters that we used to fill in high school with the same number. That's the constant. Because it's constant, it doesn't change. That number fits in there because that's the way gravity is tuned. You know, that's the way such and such a force is given in nature. And that's not determined by the laws of nature. It just seems to be arbitrary. That's just how it's set. And there's dozens and dozens of these different constants, not just one of them. And all of them very finely tuned, that if the number was changed just a wee bit here or there, everything in the universe would explode, basically, or something along those lines, where we wouldn't even have planets. So that there's certainty we wouldn't have any life to live on there. People start to imagine different forms of life, or maybe not carbon-based life. Yeah, right. What are you going to do when you don't have planets? So the next one is, this is more of the definition here. Now that you know what the constants are, fine-tuning is not a reference to design already. It's not predetermined as a design term. This is the term they use in cosmology that has to do with the small deviations from these actual values and constants, rendering the universe life prohibiting. In the reverse, if I say that in reverse, it's that these constants are not deviated. Their actual values are keeping the universe as life, what's the opposite of prohibiting? Life permitting. That's what it is. So our universe is life permitting. We are here, lots of life on Earth, right? And we know that there are not many planets in the solar system like Earth. In fact, just one. This is pretty much the astronomer's experience with the limitations we have of seeing other solar systems and other planets. They require a great amount of fine-tuning, not just in these constants, but these would be first so that we have a universe, but that even after having planets, the Earth has to be just so in the Goldilocks zone, just so, such a distance from the sun, not too close, not too far, and tilted for the seasons. And water, we must have water on the Earth. We must have the continental shift that we have, apparently. Lots and lots of little things like this help Earth being a home for us. So it begins to sound a lot less like randomness and a lot more like specified complexity, or that somebody's been monkeying with physics, as one physicist famously put it. But not even atomic matter or chemistry would exist if these constants had these small deviations away from the way they are set. And there's nothing in nature that seems to set them. Why are they set in these ways? So even mathematicians are amazed by the order in nature. And they sometimes call mathematics the language of God. This kind of amazement by just numbers. I'm amazed that they're amazed, because I'm not a numbers person per se, but I appreciate that they're amazed. So not even atomic matter or chemistry would be able to exist, because, I mean, not to say nothing of planets, because the gravity would be different. The expansion of the universe would have expanded too fast or too slow, and it would just collapse back in on itself. These are the kinds of issues that cosmologists are thinking about when they are talking about fine-tuning, atheists or otherwise, when they're talking about the Big Bang. These are the kinds of fine-tuning. So then the next question is, what explains this fine-tuning, this level of fine-tuning? Are we saying that this is a cosmic accident? Or is it physically necessary that these had to be such a way? Or is it design? So that's the fine-tuning argument. The one that I'm sharing here. Yeah, that is the fine-tuning argument. Okay, so physical necessity. What about that? well, not many people are really bidding for this option. We can easily imagine the universe being quite different than it is, right? That's all it takes. If it's physically necessary that the universe be this way for life, then why does it seem so likely that the universe would not contain life or planets or all these other things? Why is it so well balanced? It doesn't have to be balanced. And physical necessity would make you think of what something is because it has to be that way by the laws of nature. Physics does not show that it couldn't have been otherwise. In fact, it seems to allow for a great number of physical possibilities. For example, not all tree species need to survive. Some species have gone dead and we're still okay. And then, I don't know if that's the best argument, but that was my example. The Earth need not be in the Goldilocks zone. So ranking it up from some trees dying, or pick your species, the whole Earth need not be in this Goldilocks zone for the water not to burn up and evaporate or freeze and be useless, right? That's what the Goldilocks zone is. If you are too close to the sun, no water. If you're too far away from the sun, frozen. So there's no life if you don't have the water. The universe doesn't seem to require life permitting qualities at all. So even on the grand scale of the whole universe, or down to the scale of trees, it doesn't seem that anything in life is physically necessary this way. It could have been otherwise. Maybe, the law of gravity is the way it is, and just deal with it, that kind of thing. But yeah, that's not the only thing we're thinking about here. So physical necessity isn't a good option, and there aren't very many people actually pushing for that. The big one is chance. Could it have happened by chance? Is that what caused everything in the universe? And in my children's science books that we inherited from somebody, all of the planet books that try to teach about the planets, they have this crashed into that, this crashed into that, and then this crashed into that. So it's the answer to every question in the book. How did this happen? Oh, something crashed into something else. In other words, chance happened. Not that I'm denying anything crashes into anything, but still, if we were to say the universe's fine-tuning was as it is, just taking about 20 different constants. There are more. I forgot the number, so I'm guesstimating here. But this is the number that keeps popping up in people's apologetics when they talk about the odds. In William Lane Craig's book, for example, he gives a lot of different numbers like this astronomical numbers. And this is the one that is basically the number of atoms in the known universe. That's how many 10 over 60 is. 60 zeros. And it's 1 in 10 to the 60th power that something like the constants would all be aligned with the certain numbers that they are by chance, by randomness. Well, if you're a betting man or a betting woman, you would certainly not go with chance then, because, well, the odds are so stacked against that chance. So better to go with, it's almost like Pascal's wager, right? Better to go with design than chance, because all of this stuff looks so organized. And I accept that as an argument, but I don't like it. You know why? Because someone's just going to say, but there's still a chance. So you're saying there's still a chance because you just gave a mathematical possibility. So it's possible by way of your language, at least. I don't think that's the point being made, but it is still a chance. Well, you know what? We don't even have to go to these odds. The astronomical odds are helpful, very helpful, but it's not just bad odds that the universe is like this. that it's so well balanced and designed for life. It's not a chance. There is no chance. And that's R.C. Sproul's way of putting it. He says chance is no thing. It is not a thing. It's nothing. Chance is nothing. So if chance is nothing, it's not a contender, right? We have physical necessity, no thing, or design. So now we just eliminated the no thing, because what's the use of putting that empty spot in our equation? No, in our syllogism, we don't need it. I would like to read just a quote out of R.C. Sproul and Gerstner's and Lindsay's book that I showed you last time, the Classical Apologetics book, when they talk briefly about chance. Chance is thought of, they're talking about modern discourse, modern talk and science talk and philosophy. Chance is thought of as some sort of non-purposeful entity, which accounts for the existence of what is called purposeful. In other words, chance is the non-purposeful producer of purpose. Without purposing to do so, the non-purposive produces the purposive. Even if I didn't pronounce that right, I think you can kind of sense the gibberish that I just had to push my mouth through, because it's absurd that someone could say the words non-purposeful producer of purpose. Because if it's producing purpose, it is purposeful. It can't be non-purposeful because it just made purpose. So the idea of chance produced purpose is a contradiction in terms. If we understand the word chance, that is, perhaps there's more than one definition of chance. So we need to understand what chance is, but if it's thought of as some sort of entity which accounts for the existence of that called purposeful, what we have there is an absurd statement. That's not possible. It's just it shows that it's not true. Here's how R.C. Sproul puts it, because chance is also thought of sort of as an entity like a god of chaos. People talk about it as luck. People talk about it as something happening by chance. Even using that preposition is a little bit strange for a word that describes a mathematical possibility. Isn't that what chance usually is supposed to mean? A mathematical percentage of something? So how can something happen by a number? See, that goes back to the cosmological argument when we are thinking about what could cause the universe. If it's not material and it's not energy, it's not anything in the universe, there's only two possibilities that you can have as a cause. That would be an entity like God, or numbers and abstract concepts. Abstract concepts don't cause anything. That's kind of what is meant by abstract concept. There's no causal relationship because they're ideas. So it becomes a very strong argument as we go. Each case, how certain we can be that God exists, just like the Bible says we should be. And one of those last remaining pillars of ignorance that stands against that certainty is this powerful idea of chance having its own power. But we speak about it without realizing that we're speaking about it in this way. Let's hear R.C. Sproul speak about it.
This is what philosophers and scientists of all ages have all agreed, that the word chance becomes a word to define our ignorance. We throw the word chance in the equation when we don't know what's going on out there, when we can't do our homework analytically and come up to a cogent understanding. We begin to attribute things to chance, to the power of chance. You say, but wait a minute, see, we play games of chance where the cards are shuffled randomly and the cards are dealt And there are statistical odds that you can determine on the basis of the dealing of every hand of cards that you play. That's true. And I like to play cards, and I've studied mathematical possibilities in bridge and gin rummy and all the rest. And when I play according to the odds. And it really helps me to know what the mathematical possibilities are in so-called games of chance. But it's a game of chance because I don't know how those cards were sorted. But the reason why I am dealt the hand that I'm dealt in a game of bridge or in a game of gin rummy is because how they were arranged when they were shuffled the first time, how they were arranged when they were shuffled the second time, how they were dealt, into what sequence they were dealt, and so on. Chance was not some invisible demon that jumps into the middle of the card dealer and causes certain cards to be set in a certain sequence. Because there is no such invisible power called chance, because again, chance has no being. And since it has no being, it has no power.
So it cannot be necessity and it cannot be chance, right? If chance has no power and physical necessity doesn't seem likely, then you only have one candidate left over. And even if you don't like it, you have to admit that it actually seems far more possible than nothing doing it, or that it was physically necessary. It couldn't have been any other way than it is now. Therefore, it is due to design. So you have a fine-tuning argument now to defend Christianity or any theism. Again, this is not an argument that proves Christianity is true, but it does help us to get there, because if someone has a problem with the idea of God existing, well, you asked for evidence, here's evidence. This is a good argument for God's existence. Now, people can decide not to be convinced by this, but they will have to choose one of two illogical options in order to avoid the conclusion, because the conclusion is so logically following, it just pulls you down the hill, basically. So due to the design, we have the fine-tuning constants in all of these equations that describe the laws of gravity, laws of physics, rather. And if I were more into physics, I would get into that more, and maybe I'd be excited about that even more. But that's the thing about academics. There's always more to learn. This design is something that the Bible speaks about. We shouldn't be afraid of it. If it's in philosophy or it's in the Bible, as long as it's true, right? The Bible is our main source. The Bible is the sola scriptura, the source of truth about God. And if our philosophy ends up leading people to the Bible, all the more power to you to do it. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. So now we have Genesis 1:1 completed. The beginning being our cosmological argument, and that he created the heavens and earth in the fine-tuned sense is the second half of the verse. In the next video session, I'm going to break now for so I can get this on YouTube in 1 hour segments. The next video section will be about the historical case for the resurrection. So now we're going to get into the nitty-gritty of proving our Christianity is true, not just that there's some God somewhere who is good and who created, but that this God that we're speaking of is the God of the Bible, the God that we serve, and the God who raised Jesus from the dead. So see you after I set up the next video.